Welcome to Taking Stock. I'm Amanda Lang. Coming up on the show, minimum wage has gone up across Canada. So what do businesses think of that? And wildfires are already threatening communities in this country. We will look at efforts to help. Plus, should big banks be financing big oil? That's all ahead. First, for the week that was in business, it's time for the briefs. U.S. inflation slowed in April, a welcome sign that higher rates there are having the desired effect. At 3.4%, it's still hotter than the central bank would like, but it's a step in the right direction at least. Coupled with a weaker showing on retail sales, it could mean the U.S. Federal Reserve could lower rates sooner than previously expected. The U.S. also imposed new tariffs on Chinese goods set to be phased in over 3 years. The tariffs target electric vehicles, solar cells, and aluminum, among other things, and range from 25% to 100% on cars. Right now, it only hits about $18 billion of goods, so it isn't expected to be immediately inflationary, but it sends a strong message about U.S. protectionism. Port Colborne, Ontario will be home to the next plant supporting Honda's electric vehicle supply chain. The lithium-ion separator plant is being built by Japanese firm Asahi Kasei to feed into Honda's $15 billion investment in electric vehicles in Canada that was announced back in April. Another set of clothing store names will disappear from Canada as Ted Baker, Brooks Brothers, and Lucky Brands all begin to liquidate. All three brands are owned by New York-based Authentic Brands Group. 25 stores in Canada will be affected. Wildfires burning in BC and Alberta threatened populations in nearby towns this week. Residents of Fort McMurray, Alberta, were forced to evacuate. That included some who lost homes to the big fire there in 2016. Air quality was also affected in neighboring Saskatchewan. At one point, there were more than 130 active wildfires in Western Canada, including 14 considered out of control. And those are your business briefs. With cost of living concerns on the rise, so is interest in increasing the minimum wage across Canada. Some businesses think that's the wrong answer to the problem. Jairo Yunis is Acting Director for BC and Western Economic Policy at the Canadian Federation for Independent Business. Thanks for being with us, Jairo.
Thank you for having me, Amanda.
So you guys actually have a survey from your members. And what do they say about the attacking the problem by raising wages?
Sure. We found that despite good intentions, mandatory wage policies, whether they're minimum wage policies or living wage policies, not only fall short in addressing the root causes of the rising cost of living, but also increases the cost on small businesses. And the latest minimum wage hikes had significant impact on small businesses across the country.
And so this is an age-old debate, Jairo. Of course, we know that when minimum wages are talked about being raised or are raised, small businesses worry about the cost. Is there not a case to be made that we can pass that on to the customer? There is a mildly inflationary effect of it, but that because of it raises the standard of living and therefore purchasing power, it can come out as a wash?
Definitely. And despite the policy's good intentions, we found that the latest minimum wage hikes, as you mentioned, contributed to inflationary pressures. It forced 60% of small business owners to raise prices and to raise wages for those employees earning above minimum wage. So it does have a snowball effect. We've heard the Bank of Canada consistently stating that wage adjustments should be reasonable and commensurate with productivity gains so they don't trickle down into higher prices. And another thing that's not talked about that much is we found that 1 in 4 small businesses had to hold off on investments, something that, as you know, is desperately needed right now in the context of our current productivity crisis.
The other thing that really came through in this survey to me was that small business believes that this is not the way to tackle affordability, that there are issues around housing, supply chain inflation, things that governments do have levers to deal with, and they would rather that they dealt with them not by raising the wages, but by attacking the problems at the source.
Absolutely. Like 9 out of 10 Canadian small businesses think that the government's efforts or the measures, their policies to tackle the rising cost of living are just not working. Business owners feel that their voice aren't being heard, that they're left to handle the burden on their own. And beneath this is the assumption that businesses should shoulder the entire responsibility for helping workers cope with the increasing cost of living. But in reality, governments should also step up. Let's take, for example, gasoline prices. Here in Vancouver, 34 cents are paid in provincial fuel and carbon taxes. So we've seen already in some provinces like in Manitoba, Ontario, and Alberta, cutting some of those fuel taxes. And that's quite the measure of affordability that some governments can take. Let's take housing, for example, exclusionary zoning regulations. It's impacting the construction of new rental units. The price of food, the price of food, and how carbon taxes impact the production of food. So definitely, when we talk about rent, we talk about food, we talk about gasoline, utility costs. Those are things that are heavily influenced by taxes and regulations, which shape consumer prices.
We've only got 10 seconds here, but do you believe that the increases we've already seen will be bad for business?
Well, businesses are not against minimum wage hikes as long as they're commensurate with level of skills, experience, and productivity gains. What we're seeing is that the cost of living crisis requires a more effective framework, a framework that makes sure that rent, food, and gas prices are affordable and stable, while also extending to supports to workers and small businesses through using the fiscal system.
Great to have you, Jairo. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, Amanda. Have a good one.
Jairo Yunis is Acting Director, BC and Western Economic Policy for the CFIB. Still ahead, fighting the cost of wildfires through prevention. Stay with us.